President Trump tells the Democrat Minnesota governor to shove it as Trump denies his request for the federal government to pay for the riots that Minneapolis's Democrats encouraged. In this video, we're going to take a look at the governor's request for disaster relief and precisely why President Trump rejected such a request. And we're going to find out that, when all is said and done, President Trump's rejection is rather simple. There can be no disaster relief for Democrat-ruined cities precisely because Democrats are the disaster. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone, patriots all across the globe. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you as always. If this is your first time at our channel, we analyze current events, analyze some super awesome conservative trends so you can live in the present in light of even better things to come. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that subscribe button. It'd be an absolute privilege to have you as a regular part of this channel, where each and every day we together celebrate the inevitable collapse of left-wing globalism and the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age. Let's start with our video chat question of the day. This should be a doozy. Do you support President Trump's rejection of disaster relief for the city of Minneapolis? Let us know in the comments section below. This should be for interesting reading. Do you support President Trump's decision to reject the Democrat governor's request for federal aid to the tune of several $1,000,000? Let us know what you think. It should make for a very interesting discussion thread, because in the end, we're going to find that in many respects, President Trump has said to the Democrat-ruined cities that if you really want real disaster relief, you've got to first stop voting Democrat. Now, before we jump into things here, let's give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that's Collagen, available at my special website, healthwithsteveturley.com. Now, if you don't know, collagen may be the closest thing we'll ever get to a real fountain of youth. Many health experts now agree that consuming collagen is crucial as it gets to renew and revitalize how you look and feel. Taking collagen regularly can revitalize your body, can make your skin, bones, and even your hair look and feel more healthy and youthful. Now, if you're interested in learning more about collagen and getting your own supply, then visit with healthwithsteveturley.com or just click on the link below and check it out. In fact, if you click on that link today, you can get up to 51% off your order. So don't wait. Click on that link below and get your own collagen supply. You'll be glad that you did. All right, gang, so let's dive right in here. Fascinating stuff. Now, we've been documenting for the last few weeks how President Trump has indeed begun fighting back and effectively crushing the far left. And I'm happy to report that we continue to see, shall we say, the counterinsurgency continue in the Trump administration. Now, the latest example, perhaps the most explicit example of how Trump represents nothing short than an existential threat to the left, comes from Minnesota, particularly Minneapolis. Now, as I'm sure you're all well aware, Minneapolis was ground zero for the race riots that swept throughout our nation's cities for the last several weeks. So Minneapolis was where George Floyd was killed by a white cop, and it basically became the center of this crazy insanity where our nation's cities became collective, purges, right? The movie The Purge, where our nation's Democrat mayors and governors actually supported and encouraged violence and looting and burning and destruction like we've never seen. Well, now, after actually defending the rioters, after siding with the lawless these last several weeks, now keep in mind as well, after Minneapolis, their city council unanimously voted to disband their police department, now the ultra-left-wing governor of Minnesota actually has the goal to request that we, the taxpayers, we pay for all the damages. Last week, Governor Tim Walz officially requested disaster aid from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to the tune of $16 million to help rebuild Minnesota after it was ravaged by looters and rioters who burned down much of Minnesota's businesses and infrastructure. Now, again, I want this to hit you with maximum impact here. When all of this blew up, Trump called the Minnesota government's response to the riots a laughingstock, which of course it was. It was an abject disaster. Even the governor later acknowledged. He admitted that the government's response to the riots were, in his words, an abject failure. And he was part of that failure, right? Right after it broke out, this Governor Walz, this leftist governor, he scolded Trump for what he called his unhelpful tweets that he claimed were just inflaming the protesters. So all of this is to say that after this abject disaster that was both Minnesota's and Minneapolis's response to the rioters and looters, after this total and complete left-wing incompetence, most of it willful, right? This was intentional incompetence as evidenced by the unanimous decision to disband the police in Minneapolis by their city council. The governor has filed for federal aid in helping to rebuild Minneapolis, and President Trump responded by telling him, in effect, to shove it. He told him to screw off. After all the apologies on behalf of the so-called protesters, after all of the excuse-making, after all the Democrat rejection of law enforcement, after all the pandering and pathetic accommodations to these thugs, the governor actually had the gall to ask each one of us, the taxpayers of this nation, to flip the bill for this horrific mess that their own Democratic incompetence made. And President Trump, I think, spoke on behalf of all of us. The Trump administration formally rejected the request by Minnesota's ultra-left governor for millions of dollars in federal aid to repair damage to buildings and infrastructure destroyed in their own self-inflicted riots. The total damage is estimated to be around nearly $500 million, $500 million. And Trump has said, you made your bed, now you got to sleep in it. You deliberately chose to enact a lackluster response. Top law enforcement leaders confirmed that the Minnesota government deployed minimal National Guard forces, which simply couldn't mitigate the damage that was being done by the rioters and looters. So Trump offered the support of the United States military, but the governor rejected that offer. And then, after the smoke cleared from all the violent insanity, the Minneapolis City Council added insult to injury by voting unanimously to abolish the Minneapolis Police Department. And so, it's no wonder that a Republican representative from Minnesota by the name of Tom Emmer formally requested of our president to first order a federal review of Minnesota's response to the violence before considering any federal funds for the requested relief. Lawmakers like this Minnesota Republican are recognizing that the Minnesota government was derelict in its law enforcement duties. In many respects, the Minneapolis government deliberately abdicated their law enforcement authority, and as a result, much of Minneapolis burned to the ground. And it is frankly an insult to then turn around and ask taxpayers to pay for your own gross incompetence. Think about it. This is a Democrat governor, when you think about it, asking on behalf of a Democrat-ruined city. Remember, we don't say Democrat-run cities because running a city implies some level of competence and governance. No, these are Democrat-ruined cities. And so you have a Democrat governor requesting on behalf of a Democrat-ruined city disaster relief. Think how that begs the question. How can you possibly have disaster relief when Democrats themselves are the disaster? How can a Democrat lawmaker that sides with rioting lawbreakers, how can you request disaster relief when you yourself are the disaster? Democrats are the disaster. So how can there possibly be disaster relief as long as they're in charge? There can't be by definition. And that's precisely what Trump is saying in denying this disaster relief. As long as you keep voting in Democrats, there by definition can be no disaster relief. Now, in case you don't know, Minneapolis remains a ruined mess. Shooting deaths have more than doubled this year as compared to this time last year, and nearly half of all those shootings have happened since George Floyd's death. On Father's Day, just a few weeks back, a mass shooting on a crowded street uptown struck 11 people. The next day saw a number of retaliatory shootings. Over the weekend, there were 6 shootings in 6 hours in Minneapolis. 9 people were wounded, 1 was killed. And Minneapolis isn't alone. Democrat-ruined cities are rotting all across the country. A total of 16 children, I'll say that again, children were shot and killed over the course of 48 hours in cities across the nation over the Independence Day weekend. In Bill de Blasio's New York City, shootings have surged by more than 358% in mid-June when compared to the same time last year. That's an almost 400% increase in shootings in New York. Similarly, the murder rate in Chicago has increased by 80% over the last month. It is no wonder people are leaving cities in droves. Look at this. New apartment leases have plunged 62% in New York. 62%. And this is at the same time that vacant apartment listings jumped 34% in Manhattan. And it's not just professionals who are leaving, it's police officers. Surprise, surprise. Look at this. Just as Mayor Bill de Blasio announced $1 billion in cuts to the New York Police Department, well, what do you know? Retirement applications have surged upwards of 400% among New York cops. A 400% surge in police retirements. Absolutely unprecedented. People are leaving these Democrat-ruined cities in droves. And so this request for disaster relief by a Democrat governor on behalf of a Democrat-ruined city could not possibly be more ironic. As long as our cities are run by Democrats, there cannot, by definition, be any relief, disaster relief whatsoever, precisely because Democrats are the disaster. President Trump, in denying the Minnesota governor's request, has affirmed just that. Disaster relief comes only by voting these incompetent Democrat politicians out of office. That is the day that Minneapolis will have finally begun to recover. Now, before you go, you will definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded on how our nation's excerpts are indeed preparing for civil war. You're not going to want to miss this. It's a very interesting video. Make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.